Make sure you like this video and subscribe down below. Also, don't forget to hit the bell notification so you don't miss a new video. So today, we'll just be talking about the Cuban embargo scandal. So this has just been going on for a long time, and we feel that we need to just update everyone because there's so much confusion out there with the whole thing, and we just wanted to get the facts straight for you guys.
So basically, it all started when Fidel Castro led a revolution to overthrow Batista in Cuba.
Mom, can you pick me up? I'm scared.
Nobody really liked Batista because he only cares about U.S. companies and not the people. So that wasn't good for Cubans. But he even canceled elections for office so that he could lead.
But the United States of America supported Batista and did not like Castro because his views came across as communist, which the U.S. didn't like. Once Castro came into office, he started taking land from U.S. companies and giving it to the Cuban people.
There were a lot of Cubans who were scared of Castro, so they moved to Florida. This flood of Cubans to America was called the Mariel Boat Lift. The U.S. then decided they were going to invade Cuba and try to get rid of their enemy, which is Castro. They enlisted most of the Cubans who moved to America to help them so that the invasion didn't seem like it was coming from them.
The U.S. also relied on the fact that the Cuban people didn't like Castro, so that they would join in taking him down once the exiles arrived. But they were very, very wrong. Once they invaded, none of the Cuban people wanted to join because they actually liked Castro. This is called the Bay of Pigs invasion. It was a total fail.
After the Bay of Pigs, the U.S. seemed weak because of their failure. After this happened, the U.S. planted missiles in Turkey and Italy that could easily be fired onto the Soviet Union. They also placed an embargo on Cuba, which continually got more strict. Later, the U.S. sent spy planes over Cuba and saw that the Soviet Union had planted missiles in Cuba.
John F. Kennedy, president at the time, met with the Soviet Minister of Foreign Affairs, who told him that the missiles were purely defensive. JFK decided to put a blockade around Cuba to block weapons from entering. The leader of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev, just sends a proposal that as long as the U.S. doesn't attack Cuba, they will take out their missiles.
He later gave a public broadcast saying that the only way he will take out their missiles is if the U.S. also takes out their missiles. The U.S. only responded to the first request publicly, but privately agreed to take out their missiles as well. This was done privately so that they didn't seem weak.
So that is the truth of what happened between the United States, Cuba, and the Soviet Union. The major problem currently is that the embargo is still there. Cuba has no economic help from the U.S., so since the Soviet Union fell apart, their economy and country as a whole have been going down rapidly.
Things got even worse for Cuba after the dissolution of the Soviet Union on December 26, 1991. This left Cuba without the USSR as a strong communist ally, so Cuba was left as a small independent nation with a crumbling economy and the U.S. keeping them from rebounding. Cuba overall has struggled since, and neither Cuba or the U.S. are benefiting from the embargo.
The Cuban embargo has been up for a very long time, and so far nothing has changed. The goal of the embargo is to help push Cuba towards a democracy so we could rebuild the relationship with the neighboring country that was not communist. So, by keeping it there, has not been much more change that hasn't already. The Cuban embargo has been upheld also for humanitarian reasons, in order to urge the Cuban government to treat their people better. However, it is doing the opposite. Without American resources, Cuban life has been deteriorating, and the Cuban, and is overall counterintuitive.
Okay, since the Cuban embargo has been up, the quality of Cuban healthcare has gone down, and there are fewer food sources and resources in general. This, in turn, caused the death rate to go up. Medical professionals in Cuba have access to less than 50% of drugs that most countries have access to. Treatments for many diseases are unavailable to Cubans because they are under U.S. patents. Reports show that the caloric intake of Cubans from 1989 to 1992 has dropped by 33%. Access to food for Cubans is limited, as food is rationed in order to feed everyone efficiently. The Cuban embargo is hurting the people more than pressuring the government.
The U.S. would benefit from dismantling the Cuban embargo by improving ties with Cuba along with other countries. In a UN vote, all but the U.S. and Israel, a close ally, voted against the embargo. So by lifting it, the U.S. would make many other countries happy. This would strengthen international relations because other countries see flaw in the U.S.'s current policy towards Cuba.
Lifting the embargo would also benefit both the U.S. and Cuba by increasing U.S. exports and Cuba's imports. The U.S. would profit $1.2 billion a year if trade with Cuba were resumed, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That is a lot of money that the U.S. isn't making because of the outdated restrictions on Cuban trade. Much of those exports come from agriculture. If agricultural trade resumed between the countries, it is estimated to add 6,000 jobs to the U.S. These Cuban imports will increase the quality of life for Cubans by having access to more food because the U.S. is so close, and all other U.S.-based goods. The U.S. is making the U.S. even made an apology video. It definitely doesn't cut it.
In their video, they explain why they keep the Cuban embargo up.
I know many of you are disappointed in me, but I have to keep it there because then there's nothing. They're just gonna keep doing what they're doing, and it has to stop. They oppress so many people, and we need to keep the embargo there so that they don't do that. And, you know, every single time I've tried to reach out to Cuba and try to keep relationships good, they always just retaliate. They never actually help, you know? Like in 1977, we tried to help, but they just responded by sending like criminals to America, to me. And then later we tried again, but they just kept hurting people who disagreed with them. Just every time they just don't listen. That's why we have to keep it there. That's why we have to keep it up. Because I'm so sorry that everyone hates me. That everyone's disappointed.
But that's just not true. While the embargo is putting pressure on Cuba with nothing different after so long, nothing will continue to change. More will get done by improving the relationships and getting rid of the embargo.
Even now, relations are still changing. During the Obama presidency, he made relations with Cuba much better and got closer to getting rid of the embargo. Immediately after becoming president, he worked with Castro to ease the embargo and form a better relationship. In 2016, Obama went to Cuba as the first president to visit there since 1928.
But once Trump went into office, he undid all of that. He added more restrictions on travel to Cuba and, according to Council of Foreign Relations, prohibitions on commerce with businesses owned by the Cuban military and security services. In March of 2019, he opened up a 1-month period when the U.S. citizens can sue Cuban militaries for stealing their property.
Currently, the Castro regime has ended, and Miguel Diaz-Canel is now in charge.
Cuba's Communist Party is still leading. However, in 2018, they drafted a new constitution and said that they would be focusing on developing socialism opposed to their Soviet-era goal of building a communist society. This is a prime example of change.
The Cold War is over, and the USSR has collapsed. So even so, Cuba would not be seen as a threat to the U.S. The embargo is nothing but a relic of the Cold War, and so much has changed since. The embargo does not fit into the current state of either of the countries involved, and the U.S. should strive to help Cuba rather than systematically dismantle it.
The embargo is just overall not good, and we all agree that it should be gotten rid of. The Cuban embargo should be lifted because it is outdated, ineffective, and is causing more harm than good in both the United States and Cuba. God.
So that's all we have to say about this scandal. We love reading your comments, so make sure you leave one down below about what you think and your opinions on this. We hope you enjoyed this week's video. Bye!
Our hands up.
You have to keep that for a blooper.
After everything. The whole thing is going to be a blooper.
Good. No.
You're exposed. You are exposed. Exposed, 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 exposed.
Thank you, Dan, for recording the first half of the video. You were very patient. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Woo.